Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss the talk emerging that Rishi Sunak may be walking into an attempted ambush at next week's Tory party conference, and also how the Conservative leader is being said to be losing the narrative ahead of not only his first party conference, but probably the crucial pre-election one. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So before I go into this alleged ambush, this notion of Sunak losing control of the media machine. Now, Sam Coates of Sky was reporting that Rishi Sunak had tried to keep a handle on announcements by giving various projects code names to prevent leaks. But then the code names were leaked as well. And this is quite serious for Sunak. There are sort of concentric circles of involvement within political parties on policy. And if you go in as far as creating code names for certain projects to stop leaks, it's because you fear that some of the people involved in that decision making are going to leak the information. In other words, you can't trust them. Well, it's politics, of course you can't trust people. But the code names do nothing unless you only share them with those you trust to maintain discretion. If they're being leaked as well, that means Sunak is unable to even know who to trust. Basically, even his closest confidants are screwing him over. So no wonder he seemed so reactionary of late. Instead of controlling the media narrative, as you'd expect the Conservative leader to do, he's completely losing control of it. Now, one little interesting thing here. This just popped up as I was coming out to record. Someone showed me, I would have looked at it later anyway, the latest YouGov polling. And that's actually shown in the last week or so that the Conservatives have gained a bit and Labour have lost a bit. So the gap's actually narrowed, and it's narrowed quite a lot. Now, I'll be interested to see what happens over time, over the course of the conference season. But that is interesting. And you think to yourself, so people will naturally be assuming, oh, this was after the net zero speech. Maybe the net zero speech has done well for him. Well, maybe, but there's lots of other things happened as well. For example, the SNP and the Lib Dems have gone up in this poll. And they're not in favour of Sunak's U-turns on net zero. So maybe it's got less to do with that, more to do with Labour's messaging the last week. Maybe it's got more to do with the things that have been reported in the press that Sunak hasn't actually said. Things about inheritance tax, for example, tax cuts, whether it be on HS2. So interesting to see how that gets distilled out. But at the moment, you would look at the situation with Sunak and he might think to himself, oh, the polling's going better for me. It's going better for me. That would be quite interesting. But if he's losing control of the narrative, if what's been reported about Tory policies are not his policies, but the ones that the Tory media want him to adopt and ones that he can't adopt, well, this matters. And it matters this year more than most because everyone's now anticipating a general election. We don't know when it is. It might be this autumn. It might be next spring or next summer or next autumn. We don't know. But everyone has their minds on it now. And we can tell that because and that's people outside of politics, but people inside politics as well. Whenever a policy is now discussed in the media, there is an extent to which there is a bit of a discussion about whether it's the right policy or the wrong policy. But it's very much been framed within the context of how will this play in the election? Whereas normally you would just talk about whether the policy is a good one or not. Sunak is leading a divided party after over 13 years in power with nothing to show for it other than some fatter fat cats. Or speaking of cats, it's also looking like Rishi Sunak is going to finish off Larry the cat, just like Liz Truss took out the Queen. There seems to be more time worrying about how to break the news to the nation than informing his spending plans. In the confusion, we're now having plans on HS2 and inheritance tax reported as if the government have announced something when it hasn't actually announced anything on either of them. Government policy now being set by the media. Rishi Sunak has to go to the party conference and tell all the delegates that will probably largely approve of these policies that their favourite Tory newspaper's been reporting on, that, sorry, it's all a load of hogwash. That he won't be dropping inheritance tax, that he's not actually proposing we spend £100 billion on a pointless rail line connecting up a bit of Birmingham with a bit of outer London. In fact, the way things are going, it looks increasingly like Sunak is going to be the Tory leader who takes away all the Christmas presents from the assembled delegates. Now, you can't have that, or that. I don't care what the Telegraph said, no tax cuts. And the Express are now reporting that Boris Johnson's allies are seeing an opportunity to cause him some political damage. The article's talking about a right-wing coalition, which is a bit of a tautology when you talk about the Tories. Of course it's right-wing. It's planning on forcing Sunak to cut taxes at the conference. Now, many of them, I'm sure, would actually want the tax cuts. But this isn't because they think it's the right policy, but because they're aware that Sunak can't deliver it. Sunak keeps trying to insist he's a low-tax Tory. Yet we have the highest tax burden for generations. And he's the Chancellor who brought it in. That was before Liz Truss got anywhere near Downing Street. They don't want him to actually cut taxes. I mean, they do, but they know he won't. You know, I mean, how can they hurt him if he actually goes, yeah, sure, tax cuts, why not? You know, that would be popular with the party. They want him to have to explicitly rule out tax cuts by asking the question very loudly, so that Johnson's allies can paint him as a prime minister with no vision, presiding over a collapsing economy with no plan to fix it. The article also suggests that they want to press him on pulling out of the European Convention on Human Rights, as well as what they're calling woke problems in schools, and pushing trans issues. The human rights issues will be interesting, because that's Suella Braverman's hobby horse at the moment. At last year's conference, when Liz Truss had just buried the Queen and was on her way to being the shortest serving Prime Minister in British history, Braverman was openly advocating policies at the conference which contradicted established government positions under Truss. So she was undermining her own leader. Be interesting to see what her reaction is at this conference. Like, if she couldn't even show solidarity with a fellow lunatic, is she going to behave herself for Sunak, who's attempting to give the impression that his government isn't actually insane? There's always talk of whether Sunak should sack Braverman or if Braverman will resign from the cabinet in order to begin work arguing for a radically different approach as part of her post-election leadership bid. I mean, if there's going to be a major push, but, you know, lots of prominent Conservatives involved in this, to make the case for policies like this, in stark contrast to Sunak's intentions. But certainly worth seeing how Braverman interacts with it, if she does at all. Like, in theory, she can dodge it. Because looking through the schedule, her speech is on the Tuesday, meaning she wouldn't actually have to be about on the Monday when this rally is taking place. I'll bet she is, though. Mind you, Jeremy Hunt is due to speak on the Monday, you know, an hour or so before this event. So I wonder if they'll try and mug him before it. And the reason this attempted ambush is potentially serious for Sunak is that it's not like he can say, well, these ideas won't work. Because, first of all, the party members will largely go, well, yeah, we think they can. But also, like, the only way to demonstrate that the path you are taking is the right one, and therefore you shouldn't take any others, is to show that you're making progress. Like I mentioned in my first video today at the Lib Dems conference, Fun and Games, in Labour, Starmer's demonstrating that his plan's working. There's confidence that he's going to do what he was made leader to do, which is win the election. So he now has a lot of leeway within the party because most of us aren't giving him the benefit of the doubt, even when we might not always see the logic in some of the decisions. Sunak doesn't have this leeway. They're not giving him the benefit of the doubt. Why would they? Like, if he were rescuing the party's poll ratings, even if it was still behind, but if you could see the gap closing, he could at least say that what he was doing was working and that changing it all for the sake of some mad ideology would risk a Labour government. In point of fact, going back to those poll ratings, if they stay like that for next week, maybe he gets to do that for the conference, although hopefully there'll be another one out just before it. But the reality is that the Labour government is now priced in. It's obvious that the current path isn't working. It's obvious that the Tories have to do something different. Now, the fact that these people are proposing something which would make things actually way worse is neither here nor there. It is appealing to many members. And you could try and say to those members, well, do you remember what happened when Liz Truss did the unfunded tax cuts? Ah, yes, but she was as mad as a loon. Rishi Sunak is more credible. He could get away with it. There's some of them that think that. You know, and they know that the status quo right now is to lose the election really badly. As badly, at least, as if they'd left Boris Johnson in charge. In fact, you can imagine quite a lot of members imagining, maybe even a lot of Tory MPs, that if the party had actually left Johnson in place, they'd be in a better position right now. Debatable, but you can see how they would think that. Basically, the party which decided that Liz Truss should replace Johnson, if anyone had to, are going to face Rishi Sunak, the man that MPs imposed on them without consultation with them, and ask him what he's done to earn their support. Johnson's cronies tried to trip Sunak up after the local elections, didn't work. Likely people thought Sunak hadn't been given enough time. Well, now he's had nearly a year. You know, it's not like there's years to go before the election either. They can't give him years and years. He's got pretty much the time he's got. Labour is so confident that Starmer seems quite happy talking about asylum and Brexit these days, as if to say, oh, I can talk about anything, because Sunak has no safe place to retreat to. He certainly has no position of strength ahead of this conference. The polling, although he's got a bit of a closing the gap right now with one pollster, although a good one, YouGov, the polling looks bad. When you look down under the bonnet of the polling, that looks worse. The head-to-heads all look worse. All he's going to have is bluff and blather. Not that this means that his intended ambushers will be able to create a fuss. You know, maybe enough of the party will realise that infighting is not going to get them anywhere. But maybe they will think that because they're looking at such a proper hiding in the election, and that challenging the leader's direction really isn't going to risk things getting much worse, maybe they think it is worth challenging him. Should be interesting. Popcorn at the ready. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships, and until next time, I'll see you later.